Welcome to Carpool Conversations, where our goal is to help equip parents to have meaningful, Christ-centered conversations with their kids. I'm Amy Lowe.
And I am Sara Jones, and today we're going to be talking about navigating change.
Welcome, everyone. Very grateful that you chose to turn on this podcast today and listen. We hope that you get some good information, but also, as usual, Sara, some encouragement, and you will get that hopefully from Sara and I today. But also, we have a great guest with us here that's going to help us unpack this idea of navigating change. And he's a friend to both Sara and I here at WinShape. His name is Jeremy Marshall. We're so glad you're here. Welcome. Woo-hoo! Tell us a little bit about your family and about what you do at WinShape.
My name's Jeremy. I live on my wife's family farm with my wife, Stacy, and three daughters, Addison, Selah, and Grace. And when I leave the farm to come to WinShape, I work with our learning and development team. So I help do training and development for all of our staff across all of our ministries and support services.
How long have you been at WinShape?
18 years.
Okay, all in the same area or done different things?
Worked at Retreat, worked for the college program, a little here, a little there. So been with the learning and development team for the last 5 years.
Would you say you're vintage to the WinShape Foundation?
You know,
have you reached that?
Spending time with college students makes you feel vintage super fast. So I've felt vintage for a long time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Vintage. Not old, just wiser.
Seasoned.
Mm-hmm. Seasoned. That's a better word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Seasoned.
So you're in the thick of parenting, like Amy and I, 3 daughters.
Yes, 15, 13, and 10.
Your own little sorority.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. We do have a sorority.
And a farm with all the animals. I know. What a dream. That's my dream. I got to experience mom-daughter weekend with your middle and your wife, and they are a blast.
Yes.
I can't wait to come visit the farm.
You're welcome anytime.
Yes. Okay, good. My daughter wanted to come. She's like, can we really go to their farm? I'm like, yes.
You really can. We'll put you to work, though.
Oh, I'm down. I have chickens in the backyard, and that's a lot of hard work. I can't imagine adding any more animals to my already animal backyard. So Jeremy, yes, thank you so much for being here with us today. This topic, change, I know can be hard. I know when I look back on my own life, every season there's change. Like you cannot avoid it. Change is coming. It's going to happen no matter what. So I'm really glad that you're here with us today so that we can just dive a little deeper into navigating change and through the lens of helping our children navigate change really well. So I want to know from a 30,000 foot view, can you help us think through this just before we dive in?
Yeah. I would say the biggest aha for me, as I've thought about and processed this topic, is really the process of adapting to change. Nobody goes around thinking that they can somehow avoid change in life. Change is inevitable. Like you said, Sara, it happens all the time. But how we adjust to change is the key, because change can happen in a moment, but transition, which is a word we use to describe the process of adjusting to change, that can take a really long time. It can even take years. Mm-hmm. And we tend to think that if we do it the right way, if we have the right mindset, or if we have the right strategy, that we can do the transition as fast as the change is. And it's just not true. And a great, really tangible example that a lot of us have experience with, if we drove down to Atlanta and went to Hartsfield and jumped on a plane to Los Angeles, in a few hours, we'd be landing in LA, and immediately our body would have gone from Eastern time zone to Pacific. And our bodies are now in the Pacific time zone, but it's going to take several days for our bodies to slowly adjust, to transition in response to the change. And so we give ourselves permission for the physical. Nobody experiences jet lag and it's like, man, why is my body not adjusting to this change? get together, body. So physically, we give ourselves a pass.
Yeah.
But mentally and emotionally and spiritually, when change has occurred and we feel disrupted, we feel like something's wrong. Maybe we made the wrong change, or we're the victim of a change, or we've got the wrong attitude, or we haven't prayed hard enough. And so William Bridges has written several books on this process of transition. And what he talks about is that in any change, regardless if it's a change we perceive as really good or a change we perceive as really bad, the first thing we experience is actually loss because things are different. And so we experience losses first, and then we move into this kind of neutral zone where the old way is different and the new way hasn't really started yet. And then last, we enter into those new beginnings. And so it's a process that we sometimes just don't give respect to.
Yeah. We want to rush past it, and
it's not comfortable.
It's not fun most of the time.
Yeah.
So Jeremy did a little workshop with my team a couple of years ago.
It was last February, actually.
And it was because we had a new team coming on, and a new team was forming, our family camp team. And so we brought Jeremy in to lead us because he had led another session that I was a part of. So when he does a good job, I just keep bringing him back, which is why he's here today. And you shared that with us, Jeremy, and that was probably the biggest aha for me, was the fact that usually the beginning of a change is an ending of something else. And no wonder we don't like that, because we don't like endings. We don't like saying goodbye to things. Most of the time, change is hard for that reason. And that was a really big aha for me whenever you shared it with us, and it was so helpful for the team. But change, like you said, is just a part of life. It's going to come our way, whether we like it or not. And as we think about being a parent and helping our kid navigate change, I think we know that it's healthy. We know that it builds resiliency. We know that it's something that our kids have got to figure out how to work through, and let's do it in a healthy way together as a family. And for us, probably our biggest change for our family was moving from Nashville to Atlanta about 7 years ago. We left their only home that they've ever known and came to work for WinShape 7 years ago. And we're so grateful and very it was so wonderful in so many ways, but it was also really hard. And it's a part of their story now, which is so neat because it was at a pivotal moment in their life. And when we talk about our stories and share them, they always share about the move and how the Lord was so good to us in the move. And anyway, it's just a neat thing. So tell us, Jeremy, about some changes that you've had, because I think a lot of times what's good about this, change is coming in the future, but let's turn around and look backwards because, hey, you've been through some changes already and made it through the other side and are probably grateful for those things. And I think that perspective really does help. What changes have y'all been through?
Yeah, well, we've experienced a lot of changes, and I think as a kind of a precursor to put on my counselor hat for a moment, because that's a side gig I have. I think that if we're honest as parents, one of the pressures we feel in change with our kids is that we want our kids to be okay.
Yeah.
And feel okay and think things are okay, because that's an indicator that we're doing okay. And if they feel bad or responding badly to a change, we can take that as an indicator that we've messed up or we're messing them up. So riding the brakes on that is really important. So a big one for us, again, moves are just so huge. So y'all may know our family got to live on Barry's campus with WinShape for several years while we're serving the college program. So 27,000 acres, wildlife reserve, animals everywhere. We're living in a girls' dorm, in a townhome at the end of a girls' dorm. So with 3 daughters, they're in the kitchen and they open a door in the kitchen and there's a dorm hall and there's 50 big sisters who want to play with them and give them irresponsible amounts of sugar and all that kind of stuff. And so when that season came to an end for us and we moved to my wife's family farm, our oldest especially just didn't like it. She wanted to WinShape, she felt like was home, and those girls were her sisters, and she felt kind of all alone, don't have really any neighbors with similar aged kids on the farm. And so she was really honest, like, if we could move back tomorrow, I would move back tomorrow. And so our like disciplined response, not natural, but disciplined, was like, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And this is a big loss for you, especially because you've grown up here.
Mm-hmm.
And giving her permission to be wherever she was at with it. And if you never think that this was good, that's even okay. And alongside of that, we can help you discover some good new things as we move from the endings through transition to the new beginnings. She got a horse, and that was really cool. And there's other animals she's getting to take care of, and lots of space for her to explore. And enjoying those things and finding joy in those doesn't have to replace the sorrow and the loss. She can experience that sorrow and joy at the same time. And if she can feel permission for that and experience that, what a huge lesson for the rest of life.
I remember when I went to college, I called home after 2 months in. I am so overwhelmed. I'm overcommitted. I had a job. I was in a sorority. I was taking classes. But I was raised in this small little bubble, a really small town. I couldn't wait to go to college. But once I got there, it was too much. Like the change was too much. And I remember calling home and crying to my mom. And I said, I can't do this. I am coming home. And she said, no. I was like, wait, what? I'm telling you, this is too hard. The change is too hard. I'm coming home. She was like, I'm so sorry. You've got to stick this out. And I was so sad. And it took me a week or two. And I was like, you know what? She's not rescuing me. I have flown the nest. I have to stay. But eventually I worked through the change, obviously, absolutely loved it. I look back on my college season and think that was like one of the greatest times of my life. Obviously, being a mom and a wife is a blast too, but gosh, that college season was so good. And the change was hard, and I wanted her to rescue me, and she didn't. And I tell the story to her now, and she was like, it was actually so hard for me to tell you couldn't come home because I knew that this was a really hard transition. And I even think about when I moved from college and got my first job, I moved to North Carolina. And then I moved from North Carolina to Atlanta, and I knew no one. And I thought like, okay, I've exercised this change muscle a little bit, and I'm up for like, as a Jesus follower, we are always changing into the image of him. And so I had to reframe the whole change kind of mindset of, I'm going to have a story to tell where I get to glorify my Father. And so I want to keep experiencing change because I am changing to be more like him. And so even when we first got married, my husband and I made a decision at a marriage retreat that we were going to pay off student loan debt. And that meant we had to move into a basement apartment an hour away on the south side of town. And it was change. I had to find a new grocery store. Why finding a new grocery store was hard for me, but I had memorized the aisles. I knew exactly where the bread aisle was, and I knew I had a community. So the basement apartment, we look back and we're like, gosh, that was so hard and so fruitful for our marriage. And we would do it again and again and again. And so for me, the change, it was a mindset shift around change of like, change can be hard, but can also give me a story to tell, my testimony, where God gets the glory. And so sign me up for that. So Jeremy, I'm so glad you're here. So with that in mind, what are some good first steps for parents to be thinking about as they're creating experiences for their children to experience change?
Yeah. I think the first thing is really communicating clearly and as ahead of change when we know, sometimes changes hit us and we find they're here when they hit us. But when we know a change is coming, creating some slow space to talk through here. We want to let you know something that is going to happen. So this isn't like a family discussion about whether we want it to happen. Like, this is going to happen, and here's what it's going to mean. Some friends of ours years ago introduced us to a rhythm they had with their kids of doing expectation talks. And so even something as simple as a trip they're going on, which is going to be a change in their regular routine, they would talk like, here's what's going to happen. Here's where you're going to be sleeping. Here's what you're not going to get to do that you usually get to do, so that there's as few curveballs as possible and as few unknowns as possible to kind of create expectations.
That's brilliant.
And then in response, and hearing our kids' response, starting with empathy. Because we talked about that, the first stage of transition is loss.
Yeah.
But what my losses are going to be in a change are going to be different than your losses in a change. And it's easy for us to judge other people through our own loss and like, well, this is not a big deal change. Like, this other change is a really big deal, but this one's not. So if you're experiencing loss, it means you're not resilient, or it means you've got a bad attitude, or you need to pray more. Right? And so recognizing that our kids are not a different species. They're little humans. They're humans, we're humans. And so if they have a really, really big loss in a change that for us isn't one, the first job is just to be with them in that.
Empathy.
Yeah. And so I kind of alongside of that, setting alongside time to hear everything they've got and recognizing that connecting with our kids is more important than calming them down. And really, like, from a neurological, clinical counseling perspective, we've learned that really genuine calm is on the other side of connection, and connecting and being seen in my losses actually gives me permission to get calm and settle. And so even from a perspective of, we want to equip our kids and train our kids to be able to self-soothe and self-regulate. That connection is a part of that process. And so, starting with communication, starting with empathy, and giving space to connect before we try to make sure everybody's okay. Because it's okay to not be okay sometimes.
Yeah. Rescue. Gosh, I always want to rescue.
Well, and I always want to move fast. I want to just get to the other side because I know that it's going to be fine. And I've been through more change than my kids have. And I hear you saying, like, slow it down. It's okay to take, a long time to get there and to let them process and to empathize. I think that's so good because my tendency is to let's pick ourselves up and keep moving, but that's not the best thing for them if they need to process it and they need to talk it out. So that's so good. Okay, so those are some first steps, some good mindsets. Give us some more information, Jeremy, about like, okay, changes here. We've got to navigate it. Give us some more tips on navigating change.
I think one of the biggest lessons we can give our kids when we show up with those steps of communicating and empathy and connection is that having some bad feelings about a change isn't an indicator that the change is bad necessarily.
It's good.
So our middle daughter, sweet Selah, from kindergarten through, she just finished her 7th grade year, has been at this magical fairy-like school up at Berry College. And it's been incredibly formative for her. It's been wonderful specifically for her personality. And we've loved that school for all of our kids. But over the past year, we all kind of were sensing that based on some variables outside of our control, it wasn't going to continue to be the best place for her. And at church, most of her friends go to the big city school, and momentum was kind of moving towards those relationships. And so that was a decision that we decided was going to be a group decision. And we all felt over the course of this year that it was time to change. But when Selah and Mom jumped on a video call with the middle school teachers to let them know, and one of our favorite people, one of the teachers, Selah saw her tear up on the call, it really, it hit her in a really good way, but made her start questioning, this feels bad.
Yeah.
And I'm actually causing hurt for other people. Maybe this is not the right thing.
Yeah.
And so I had just had that connection with the team and said, hey, let me tell you about this process we've been talking about, that when we have a change, the loss is always first.
Yeah.
And that, all that definitely means is that you have some really good things that are worth grieving the loss of. And so this school has been a wonderful place for you. These teachers have been wonderful. The friendships have been wonderful. And it's worth crying about, and it's worth journaling about, and it's worth talking about. And that doesn't mean that for now and for what's next, this other thing is the right thing. And there's going to be new good things. And grieving this stuff well is actually what's going to be best to create space for the new things. And it was one of those, sometimes we don't get them super often, but it was a beautiful moment where she was like, thanks, Dad. That helped a lot. And man, there's just no phrase that's worth more than that. I've shown up poorly in a lot of change, but that was a win. And so now she has experience with, hey, I'm feeling some sadness, and that doesn't mean that it's the wrong thing.
Yeah. You said it before. Joy and sorrow can live together.
Yeah.
The sadness to leave. Yeah. Right? Straight. Yes, Jeremy. Also the shock of unexpected change, like a divorce, a death in the family, having to move. I had a raccoon get in the chicken coop.
Oh, that's not good.
And I just saw, the puff of feathers, and I thought, oh, my kids, they're going to be devastated. This is a shock to their system. I cried. They did not shed a tear. They were like, where should we bury her? I was like, wait, great. I'm expecting you to be so sad. You're not. You're like, oh, do we eat her? I'm like, no, we don't eat her. I'm crying. I'm so sad. They're like, maybe we could get another one. I'm like, okay. So what I expected, to be really hard, like the shock of, losing a beloved pet, was not so much for them. But I'm modeling kind of I think I did it poorly, but we do model to our kids in more ways than we probably even know how to navigate this change thing. So let's say that we're doing all the things, Jeremy, but we keep getting resistance for change. I'm actually not doing this. I'm not going to go to the school that you want me to go to because this is going to be too hard. So what advice would you give us for that?
Yeah, that's a tough one. And I need to listen to anything I'm about to say in my own context.
Okay.
Let's just be really clear.
You can listen to this back later. Yeah.
It's so much easier to talk about this and say all the wise, insightful things. But when you're in the trenches, it's a lot harder.
Yeah.
And that's because we bring our own feelings,
That's right.
Into this. And so again, back to empathy recognizing that generally speaking with big decisions, our kids don't get a seat at the table. When we're thinking about moving, when a new job comes, when a new season comes, they're not stakeholders. They're super impacted, but they don't have they find out what's happening. They don't contribute. And so recognizing that is not any easier for a kid than it is for us. When a change occurs that really significantly impacts us as adults and we didn't have a seat at the table, it's really hard for us to move through that transition process. And our kids have undeveloped brains. They haven't really totally learned how to regulate. And so it is literally going to be harder for them. So empathizing with the fact that every time there's a big change, it's a change they didn't get a say in, can give us more grace with how they show up when they're really, really being stubborn and digging in their heels. And so then with that, allowing them to be dysregulated for some time, which feels wrong and feels like enabling and all the things.
Yeah, it does.
But giving them that space creates some safety. And then when the waters get calm again, we can talk about if part of that showing up dysregulated was some actions or some habits that are just not going to serve them well in life, we can look back to that. And I would encourage starting with a story of our own. Like, I don't know about you, but I've got plenty of stories about not responding to change in a way that was helpful. And so I can share that.
Love that.
And say, like, so, here's what happened. Here's how I felt. And here's what I did with that. And here's how that kind of hurt me. And so I'm seeing how you're feeling, and how your feeling makes sense. I'm seeing what you're doing with it. And that is not going to help you. So can we talk about what you can do with that feeling that's maybe going to be more helpful? So we've experienced a lot of changes in our family. Some we've chosen, some we haven't, that our kids don't get on board with. And again, our desire, our intention is to be okay with that. The execution is different sometimes. But my favorite parenting model talks about our role as parents is to be bigger, stronger, wiser, and kind. Bigger, stronger, wiser, kind. That's a heavy list. And all of us are more biased and go towards some of those more than others. But when we're talking about sitting with our kids as they resist change and have bad feelings and reactions to change, bigger, stronger, wiser, and kind, all those together look like, hey, I hear why you don't like this change, and it makes sense.
Yep.
Like, it totally makes sense. It can't change what we're going to do. It can't have any impact on the change, but I get it. And you can be in this place as long as you need to be in this place. And we're going to have some boundaries around how you can express that. And so that we don't want to get tangled up in parents in the what they're feeling and experiencing and how they're expressing it. Because when we get that tangled, what we can communicate is, you can't feel that way. And the reality is, we can parent in a way where our kids look like they're great with everything and they're aligned with everything because they're afraid of sharing what they've got going on inside of them. And that will give us a setting that we feel really proud about. And then when they step out, it is a bad
Yeah, we don't want that.
No.
I'm glad you mentioned boundaries. I think it's important.
Yeah. But we set those boundaries before the storm, and we set those boundaries after the storm. We don't set the boundaries in the midst of the storm. We manage those boundaries in the midst of the storm. Because the ears are not super open when the winds are swirling.
And as the captain of the ship, sometimes you need to go off course because of a storm.
That's really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's maybe hard for them as they're not the captains, My husband always says, don't give the remote control to the most immature family member.
That's really good.
They're not driving. You are.
Really good.
Be the leader.
But I love the choosing to go off course because, I think thinking about what we need, if a big change is made that we did not get a say in, but it super impacts us, asking what do we need in that? Our kids are not going to need less than that. They're going to need more than that. And as captains, sometimes we can be impatient captains and be like, I know the course, just go swab the deck.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes. Hurry up and get there. Yeah.
I know. Yes, 100%. And we've usually been a part of thinking about that change usually a lot longer by the time we introduce it to our kids, especially if we're the one initiating it. And so we've worked through all of our stuff.
Trust us, it's great.
And expect them to just jump on board. But that's not how it works. That's not how it works for us. Jeremy, so many good points today, so many good pieces of wisdom that I hope that as anybody that's listening is navigating change, they could take something and be able to put it into practice. I know that there's so many of these things for me, and change is always coming. You're probably in the middle of something right now. If you're not, change is on the horizon, and it's never too early to start to think about how we're going to help our kids navigate this type of change, big, small, things that we initiate, things that happen to us, because it's just a part of life. And very helpful information. So glad you're able to be here with us today. And Sarah's going to wrap us with our question, I think.
Yes. Thanks for being here. I know that there's resilience and grit that I want my children to bear those fruit. And so I know with resilience and grit, being good at change or navigating change is going to be really important for them. And so thanks for being with us today. I've enjoyed our time together. And your wisdom is so rich. We end our time with a question for parents, moms and dads listening, so that you can just be more intentional with your kids. And so today's question is, what is change that might be on the horizon for us? And how can we reframe that change from being scary to exciting? And how can we get ready for that upcoming change? So thanks for listening today, guys. We hope that this topic is a fruitful one for your family, and that if you have change coming up, that this will help give you some tips and tricks. Thanks, guys.